My name is Rob Scotland. I'm a modern cultural anthropologist, which means I study and analyze modern culture for business purposes. 11 years ago, I stood on a TEDx stage and I made a really bold claim. I said we were raising a generation that was going to save the world. Now, why I said that, and since then, I've had a front row seat in my bold claim. My son, who was featured in that TED talk, he was 5 at that time. Now he's 16, this big, strapping lad, still plays football, still doing all those things that I referenced in the first talk. But what's interesting is that now what I've started to see is that some interesting dynamics are beginning to happen. Now, he's going to kill me for what I'm about to share next, right? But he was misbehaving in school, and he got caught. We have high standards. We're from an old school Caribbean family. What happened was the teacher is teaching equations in a maths class. Meanwhile, him and 2 of his friends are on their laptops, and they've got ChatGPT on one tab, and they've got TikTok on the other tab. And live, while the teacher is teaching, they're busy engineering their own form of education. And they got caught because they were DMing each other. Now, what's super interesting with that is when I asked, I said, listen, okay, cool. It's really, really innovative, but why did you do that? And they said, we wanted to try something else. And that's super important. We tried something else. And those 4 words have really revealed absolutely everything to me. Because what Mylo and his friends were doing at that time was re-engineering their own education. They hadn't signed up to my conventional definition of limitations. And even more so, I don't think they're actually even aware of it. So let's go back to 2015 and my first talk. There was chaos, climate, politics, the economy. And what I predicted at that time was that this incoming generation was going to save the world because what they were going to do was be survivalists. They were going to prove that they were resilient. They were going to show a new way by being collaborative. So I think I was half right. The thing is, what I think there's a fundamental difference. I don't think they see the problems we see. So the problem isn't necessarily to survive. When they're in their flow, they see problems as puzzles, something to solve for fun when they're in the right mood. It's almost a bit like an operating system that's constantly always running in the background. So they've deleted the word can't, and they've replaced it with not yet. So I'm really excited to see what happens next. I'm calling it something which a colleague of mine, Oliver Sweet, head of ethnography at Ipsos Mori, he's got a really interesting study which has shown that 73% of kids think of AI as a partner, as a co-conspirator. 73% compared to 12% of adults that feel the same. So that's really not just a statistic. That's a major evolution in our species from my perspective. Similarly, I've got a friend who's a teacher in Baltimore in the US. And I love this. It was a bit of a mic drop moment she had in one of her classes. She's teaching computers. She's teaching something about debugging. And one of the students just explodes out of nowhere. Why are we trying to memorize this? I can get AI to do this, and we can go on and solve something way more interesting. She paused and had a matrix moment and said, okay, show me. And in the next 6 minutes, they went on to make a working prototype. Something that would have taken hours, weeks, maybe a year in other circumstances. And this is one of the things that's also coming out in recent studies, is that teachers are saying, I'm learning more from my students than maybe I'm giving to them, which is a radical shift in the dynamics from that perspective. I think what's happening is it's a difference between what they see and what we see. Where we see obstacles, they're seeing experiments. When we see the need to ask for permission, they see the need to ask for Wi-Fi. Where we see the need to plan, they're thinking in a very natural way to constantly iterate. So therefore, they're redefining this concept of impossible, and they're redefining the concept of what failure should be. I found a really interesting story as I was researching this talk. There was a group of students in Singapore, and they made an air filtration system using algae bioreactors. Now, don't worry, I don't know what algae bioreactors are either. But the thing I really loved about it was when they were asked, how did you know it would work? They said, we didn't, we just tried. We didn't, and we just tried. It's that kind of thinking that means you have a problem on Monday and you have a prototype by Friday. No market research, no feasibility study, no need for a committee sign-off. Problem Monday, prototype and a solution on Friday. It's fundamentally different to how we've ever been before. So now as we move forward, we start to think, who has maybe fueled this type of thinking? And what's super interesting to me is I call it the Rick Rubin revelation. I don't know if you know Rick Rubin, but he's the producer and has worked with people like Public Enemy and Adele and Jay-Z. He's a very shaman-looking figure. And what he talks about is it's fundamental to think in the same terms as I've just mentioned. Don't say it's not been done. Just say it's not been done yet. And what's really interesting when you start to take on that thinking is that you start to look back and understand that there are forces that are creating this shift. The creative tools are absolutely everywhere. Most of you probably have more computational power in your pocket than NASA had for the moon landing. So what that means is that when we start to rewire and rethink, the concept of failure isn't as big as maybe people from my generation think it is. There isn't as much shame. Or technology is just a way to amplify and extend your own imagination. Now, what's super interesting about this is when you do have the access to technology, then it's not about privilege. It starts to become a cognitive revolution. And it means that impossible goes from being something that collectively we think of, well, we won't try that. It's been tried already. That's impossible. To a generation of people who I think are looking at it and thinking, did you even try? I've got a prediction. I think organizations who don't tap into this way of thinking are likely to be extinct in 3 years. Such is the rapid progress of this kind of thinking and technology and culture at this point. Not 10 years, not 5 years, 3. And I think it's further going to be sped up by a group of people who will be led, or they'll lead organizations, and they'll put this thinking at the heart of what they're doing, to constantly iterate, to fail fast, to redefine what it is to think of as impossible or to fail. And with that, what does that mean for us? Because my optimism has now shifted. My worry was for Alpha Gen, these kids coming through. I'm now more worried about us because I think they're going to be absolutely fine. So the key thing which we can all do, and I did as I was putting this talk together, was I had to constantly think, how can I get into a not yet frame of mind? It's just 2 words. You don't need Silicon Valley. You don't need millions in the bank. You don't need a top education. But if you can embrace this idea of not yet, then impossible can be absolutely reframed. Thank you.